be asking these questions in alternating order. Okay. Mr. Burns, you'll start. First question. What legislation would you file first on your first day of office?
Wow. One of the things that I've noticed in running an efficient company is how inefficient government can be. I don't know the exact nature of the file, but one of the things that I would do is any bill that I started would be 5 pages or less, not 2,005 pages or less. And my first bills would involve reducing the regulatory burden on businesses. We need to get monkeys off the backs of people who are willing to work hard, wanting to hire people, but can't or don't want to, much like Jeff said. It's easier these days to run up the white flag than to stay in business, and that shouldn't be. We need to help companies be profitable and hire people. So those are the things that I would go after in the first day on the job.
Again, 1 minute for response.
This way?
Yes.
All right. One of the ideas we've heard talked about recently is an idea called zero-based budgeting, and you'll hear a lot about this. And for those of you that don't know, we're facing at least what's likely a $10 billion budget shortfall this next session. And before people say we've got revenue problems, I don't believe that. I think we've got spending problems in the state. And right now, if an agency is receiving a certain amount of money, let's call it just $1 million for round figures. If they're receiving $1 million in 2010, then in 2013, they're going to come back and fully expect to receive $1 million again. That's their starting point. I think we should explore them coming in at zero. That every new legislative session, when we're starting to plan for the budget, that they come in at zero and prove to us the need and how much there is before we just automatically are giving them what we've given them in the past. I think that's something that we need to take a serious look at and push for.
Thank you, Mr. Pitchford.
Well, the question was, what bill would I introduce? Is that
That's
correct?
correct. Yes.
Correct. First thing I'd want to introduce, and I'd be on first in line for, is mandatory minimums for corrupt public officials. I see no reason why we shouldn't implement this tool. We as a society believe in mandatory minimums for people that commit crimes, giving them long prison sentences. We have had a problem in Collin County. We had a judge that took a $150,000 bribe and got probation. We had a group of clerks who literally used the taxpayers' money in order to fund the election of another clerk. The 3 ladies involved were all convicted and received probation. So one of the things we need to do is for the public to show support for people that are willing to go ahead and do what needs to be done. There's no reason why people who have privilege and power shouldn't pay for the corruption they commit. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Akers.
Well, the first bill I would introduce is a responsible spending bill, which would include zero-based budgeting. But I think it would go far beyond that. It would set up some means of how to accomplish that. For example, why don't we use technology instead of a lot of the things that we do? For example, if we used WebEx or GoToMeeting, we could reduce the travel expenses that a lot of boards and commissions have, excuse me, down to the state. We could have meetings that are conducted. I know that a lot of corporations use this kind of thing. We can also privatize or bring in business partners to do some of the things that we want to do. But it would be a spending control bill that I would introduce first.
Thank you, John. Our second question, starting with Mr. Leach. Would you revise, and how would you revise, the margins tax?
Frankly, I think, yes, I would revise the margins tax. I would like to do away with the margins tax. I think it's an unfair tax on businesses. I think we need to do away with it. There's some push out there to review the exemptions and the exceptions in the margins tax. I would not be in favor of that. I think we ought to look at doing away with the margins tax altogether, and that's what I push for and support.
Thank you. Mr. Pitchford.
Y'all can talk more if you want.
At this time,
I saw that.
I believe we should repeal the margin tax. I believe it's unfair. I believe it's even unconstitutional the way it's set up. It's a tax on your gross revenue before you get to make any deductions. We don't tax other people that way, so I believe that we should repeal it. I think that it's another way, it's a kind of hidden tax also, because you know that 1 to 1.5% tax that's being paid is also being passed along to the consumers. So I believe that we should go ahead and have honesty in taxation, that the taxes should be raised and be given to the programs who are raised for.
Thank you. Mr. Akers?
I believe that it should be taken away or eliminated. Absolutely, in a tough economic environment like we have, we do not benefit ourselves by taxing businesses. And as I was sharing with some gentlemen back at the back table back there, businesses do not pay taxes. It's their customers, or as Ken Paxton says, the public. That is exactly right. And in my view, this is a tax to do business. So it is regressive, and I think it should be eliminated.
Thank you. Mr. Burns?
Well, I think we're unanimous that we don't really like the margins tax. This was a very backhanded way of revising the franchise tax and not calling it an income tax. It's an income tax. The problem is it's not based on anyone's normal definition of net income. It ends up being a tax that's 2 or 3 times more than what my company pays in federal income tax, and that tax rate is 35%. So that's ridiculous. Let's just call it an income tax, and then at that point we have to decide that it's really not constitutional, and it needs to either be revised or repealed and replaced with something else. For the sake of transparency, I'm not going to advocate that we replace a bad tax with another tax, but that's what we have to do, at least start with, is revising or eliminating the margins tax.
Thank you, gentlemen. The next topic is going to be on education. And we'll start with Mr. Pitchford. Where do you see the education budget going, and how are we going to pay for it?
What we need to do with education is we need to have some form of standalone taxation that provides an income to education that isn't going to fluctuate from year to year, because the cost in education are pretty much fixed. We know what those costs are going to be. We need to maybe look at greater efficiencies in how we do things, but the bottom line is we should stop dishonestly providing money to education through things where we say one thing and do something else. You remember the lotto. Lotto was going to go for education, and it didn't. Then we decided we'd put $1 a pack tax on cigarettes. That money didn't go to education either. So now we're talking about legalizing gambling, and that money, I don't know where it will go, but I think it's a bad idea. I don't think we should tax bad habits.
Thank you. Mr. Akers, let me repeat the question, okay? Where do you see the education budget going? That's up or down. And how are we going to pay for it?
I don't know where the budget is going to go, because I don't think we've explored all the potentials for allowing ISDs to manage their own budgets. Right now, if a ISD is successful in managing their funds and their affairs, the state takes it away from them. So they're penalized for doing a good job. That should be stopped right away. Robin Hood is unconscionable in my mind. I think that the budget should be focused. I think we need to protect the permanent school fund, and absolutely do not consider using it for any other aspects or means to fund projects than to put it into schools.
Thank you, Mr. Burns.
Fortunately, I think with a slowly improving economy, we could probably do a little bit more for the education budget. Right now, when I look at the numbers, it looks like about $10,000 per student. I think you could probably increase the level and the quality of education for less than that if we could eliminate a lot of the mandates, a lot of the burdensome work rules that teachers have to put up with. And what really drives me crazy is the fact that we generate the money here, we send it to Austin, and we're supposed to be thankful when they give it right back. Okay, that was our money in the first place. We need to keep the money where it started, and in that case, people can fund the education of their choice. The ISDs, Plano can afford a better education than maybe somebody else who doesn't really care that much about it. I live in Richardson, Plano schools for a reason.
Thank you. Mr. Leach.
If you look at the state constitution, it's clear that one of the key core competencies and key priorities of the state is public education. It's transportation, the justice system, natural resources, health and human services, and public education. And so we need to make sure that in our budgeting process, that if there's any agencies or any scope of government that we're currently giving money to, however much it is, whether it's 100 million or 10 billion, that we're cutting back on those things first before we touch public education. I had a very eye-opening meeting just last week with some of the trustees from the Allen and Plano Independent School District, and you realize just how hard it is for teachers right now. And the last thing we need to be doing is to be cutting teachers. We need to make sure that the money that we're giving to education is actually making it to the classroom so that it's touching and impacting the lives of the students. And if there's any excess or any ways we can be doing education more efficiently, then we need to be looking for those areas, and we need to have the courage to appropriately fund them. And I'll tell you right now that there's going to be a large push for legalized gambling in Texas to fund education, and I will fight any and all efforts to bring legalized gambling into Texas. It's just not the answer.
Thank you, Joe. Our next question is on water and transportation. Okay?